Hi, Word Balloon listeners. I'm Margaret Larkin, who John has interviewed for this podcast. I lived in Japan and I love Japanese language, and I want to share a tip for learning it. When you're reading a manga or watching anime, you'll see some words that represent sounds. The best way to memorize those words is to only visualize the sound instead of thinking of the English meaning. For instance, doki doki means excited, like the sound of a heart pounding. So think of a heartbeat instead of the English translation. You can find me on YouTube at Margaret Larkin. That's Margaret Larkin on YouTube.
Hi everybody, welcome back. It's Word Balloon, the comic book conversation show. John Suntress here, continuing to look at the Eisner nominees for this year, coming up at San Diego Comic-Con, and happy to present this conversation I had at the end of the last year with Christopher Priest about Superman Lost. We also talked about Vampirella and took fan questions as well, but I've jumped to the portion where we talk about Superman Lost. We also talk about previous Priest books like Black Panther and the like, and this was great. It was my second conversation ever with Priest, and it was a pleasure. I think he's a really great man. Of course, prior to taking the pen name Christopher Priest, he used to write and edit under the name Jim Owsley, and has a very long, great career at DC and Marvel. But is a really great writer, and I do think Superman Lost in particular is a real look inside the character. It puts Clark at the other end of the galaxy, and even at his best speed, it would take him years to get back home. And it's this incredible science fiction story where he is completely away from everything. We get his journey. At the first issue, we see him leave and come back, and it's only been minutes, hours, and Lois is feeling that it's only been that long. But for Superman, it had been years, and it really messed him up mentally. And I think it's a really great exploration of a hero who is taken away from everything. A very different science fiction story than the one Philip Kennedy Johnson told when Superman was trapped on Warworld with Mongul. So if you haven't read it, I can't recommend it enough. It was just a wonderful, wonderful story. And it was great to talk to Priest about it. Christopher Priest talking about Superman Lost on today's Word Balloon. It's been called one of the top 3 real Comic-Cons in the USA. August 16th through the 18th. Discover Terrificon as it returns to the Mohegan Sun Expo Center in Uncasville, Connecticut. Terrificon showrunner Mitch Halleck has assembled his biggest and best comic creator guest list to date. Jim Lee, Scotty Young, Mark Waid, Adam Hughes, Jason Aaron, Charles Soule, Scott Snyder, Greg Capullo, Brian Azzarello, alongside legends like Chris Claremont, Jerry Ordway, Howard Chaykin, Jose Luis Garcia Lopez, Louise and Walter Simonson, Klaus Janson, Lee Weeks, and dozens more. Terrificon also brings you the actors who have brought your favorite superheroes to life on the big and small screens. Michael Rooker, Charlie Cox, Star Trek actors Walter Koenig, Nana Visitor, Armin Shimmerman, Ethan Peck, Celia Rose Gooding, and many more. That's Terrificon, August 16th through the 18th. For information on tickets and guests, visit Terrificon.com. Word Balloon is brought to you by AlexRossArt.com. Alex is a good friend of the show, and I am honored that he aligns himself with Word Balloon, and good Lord, we all love his iconic art, whether it's for DC, Marvel, things like Monty Python, the Monkees, David Bowie, so many other great licensed things, the Beatles. If you go to AlexRossArt.com, you will find great value for your dollar, whether you can spring for something like original cover art or pages to lithos and posters, every price point you can imagine. You will find something and a beautiful image from AlexRossArt.com. Word Balloon is also presented by my listeners, the League of Word Balloon listeners. The help that I get via contributions from Patreon, patreon.com/wordballoon. You hear the entertainment that I provide from Word Balloon every day, that I do a new episode. I am very fortunate to have the great creators of comics and pop culture willing to come on and give you great entertainment. I hope you will consider making an actual cash contribution via Patreon, even $1 a month. But really, if Word Balloon is worth the price of a comic book a month to you, it would be greatly appreciated if you slide that extra money you would put on an issue of a comic book to Word Balloon via Patreon. Patreon.com/wordballoon. Thank you, League of Word Balloon listeners. Got to talk to you about Superman Lost. Priest, this is so great because it's a great cosmic story. I felt the hopelessness on Superman's part. He's on a routine Justice League mission, and all of a sudden is flung across the galaxy where it's going to take him 20 years to get back home. And at least in his mind. And then he comes back, but really, I guess, in DC's Earth 1 or whatever the hell it is, he's only been gone for a few weeks. And you see the burden in his eyes, and you see the disconnect between him and Lois. And it's this wonderful internal Superman story. And just like you were saying about Vampirella, people might think, oh, it's a cosmic story about Superman, whatever. It's a very internal look inside Superman and stuff. And Lois and Luthor and a character named Hope. It's fantastic, Priest. Truly, this really caught my attention. It's one of my favorite books of the year. I kid you not.
Yeah, I think it suffers from the same problem as I guess everything I write, where people just go, well, we assume we know what this book is about. It's about this guy being lost in space. And just to, you got most of it right. He's actually only gone a couple of hours, not a couple of months. He's only gone a couple of hours.
Oh my God. I didn't realize that. Wow.
He leaves for a mission. He leaves Lois sitting at her breakfast table or whatever. And Lois is working on a story. And then Lois falls asleep at the table. And when she wakes up, Superman is standing in the living room behind her. And she goes, wow, that was quick, and Superman goes, quick? I've been gone 20 years, So he's only been gone a couple hours, but John, nothing is familiar to him, So like Clark Kent goes back to work and he can't remember what he used to do there. And Jimmy is like a ghost to him, and Perry and he's only been gone a couple hours, but he has the hardest time re-entering his life, and his wife is living with a ghost now, and so the book is not about the mission, although we see the mission obviously. The book is about how Lois gets her husband back. That's what it's about, and throughout the journey. It's kind of like either slipping into poverty, which I've done once or twice, or becoming a drug addict, which I haven't done, but I've had close family members and friends who have. In other words, it's like this slippery slope where you don't even realize that you're losing it all until you've lost it all. So in the early issues, he's sort of treating it as an intellectual problem. Navigation problem. He's like, wow, Lois is going to kill me when I get home and I tell her this story, because he realizes he's going to be gone for quite a while. He's going to be gone for a couple of weeks or whatever. And then a couple of weeks turns into a couple of months, turns into a couple of years. And eventually, you start to see, we start breaking this man down. And too many of us, myself included, kind of puts Superman on this pedestal where he becomes unrelatable, because we strip him of his manhood because he's this alien from outer space. No, he's a guy from Kansas. Okay, let's get that straight, first of all. He was raised here. He identifies as human. He thinks of himself as human. Yes, he has these powers. He's aware he's from another planet, but this is a guy from Kansas. Okay, this is a guy who was taught his values by this farmer. So I had to really walk through this with the editors at DC, and including Mike Carlin, who edited The Death of Superman, who was one of the greatest Superman editors ever. But now at the time, he was working in the television division, so he wasn't hands-on with the comics anymore. But Mike and I are old friends, and we've known each other forever. And I've spent hours and hours on the phone. So I have to give Mike credit. I have to give Dave Van Domelen credit. He's a professor in Texas. He teaches physics, applied physics, or some kind of. I'm sorry, Dave, I'm screwing this up. I don't know what you teach, but he's a big brain guy. So anything in there that sounds big brain, that sounds right, that's Dave. Anything in there that sounds stupid, that was me, you know, getting the science right and all this other stuff. But yeah, it's just one of these things where at first he's not taking it very seriously until he does, until, it's the reality of the situation starts crashing in on him. And we break this man down all the way to the bone. And I had to be very careful because I know fans, they hold Superman in such high esteem. And I know some fans are going to go, well, no, he would never break. He's Superman. And I go, you're out there in outer space and you're freezing your butt off and you're alone for years at a time. That's got to take a toll on somebody, So we have all that, and you have the poignancy in there, and then you have a lot of humor that I had to dish in a lot of, because I'm just a child. I can't help myself. So I have to put in a bunch of humor because otherwise the book would be unbearably grim if we didn't have Lobo's space dolphins show up. And we have these space scavengers, these little orange guys who show up and they're bargaining because they want to buy Superman's cape and so forth. That's lots of fun. And then this Green Lantern pops up out of nowhere. This is who John was talking about, this woman named Hope who shows up, and Superman thinks, well, here's my ride home. Hey, it's a Green Lantern. Here's my ride home. And then Hope goes, what's a Green Lantern? She has no idea what a Green Lantern is.
Yeah.
So it's this wonderful thing. And what I did was, we know in issue 1 that, spoiler alert, he makes it back. In issue 1, he's back because he's back on page 5. So, because I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to write this story where I go, will Superman make it home? Because that's just BS. He's going to make it home.
100%. Yes.
But more than that, I wanted to ground the story in the reality of Lois's experience. And Lois becomes our keyhole character who takes us through this, just like Chari was our keyhole character in Vampirella, and Everett Ross was our keyhole character in Panther. Here's a character the readers can identify with. She's an ordinary person who is encountering this extraordinary situation and this extraordinary personal conflict with our hero, and she's the one who's taking us by the hand and walking us through it. And she tries this, and she talks to this person, and she goes to Wonder Woman, and she tries that, and she tries a psychiatrist, and she tries everything she can do to help him. And then, desperate because she can't figure out any other way to help him, she turns to Lex Luthor.
Yep.
And now we take it up a notch. Yep. So it's a fun series. I hope you pick it up.
It truly, man. You as you say, yes, he is back by page 5 of the first issue. But when he is in the cosmos in those scenes, you see the desperation, you see the frustration, the momentary relief of, okay, Green Lantern, like you said. There's another cosmic hero that you think will help him. Yeah, get home and everything. No, man, it's I love it, Priest. Truly, it's one of my favorite recent Superman stories, and also. I think Philip Johnson did a great job with Superman and Warworld. Completely different story. This is so internal, and I mean, Greg Rucka. One of my favorite things he ever told me on one of my interviews with him was, bullets bounce off Superman, but you can break his heart, and that's what we're seeing in this story. Oh yeah, and also Lois is, and I love when Lois is heroic, and it's like. Lois is really, this is that connection between the two of them. And it's like, you can see that subtext of, hey, it's me, talk to me. Why aren't you able to tell me what happened to you? And he can't because it's been 20 years. And like you said, he forgot how he acted. He's not himself anymore. And it's
I kept thinking about Star Trek 4, the one with the whales. Sure. where Bones is trying to talk to Spock and trying to to get inside his head and I need you to, I'm trying to understand what you went through. And Spock / Nimoy turns to him and he says, in order for me to do that, we'd have to have some common frame of reference. So what's the common frame of reference? How does Superman relate to this? And the only way you can really write something like that truthfully is if you have lived it yourself. If you've been married, you've been in a relationship, you've been close to someone, and if you've been estranged from that person and you're trying to find your way back emotionally to that place where you two used to be, whether it's a love interest, a spouse, a mother, a father, I was estranged from my mother for a very long time before she passed away. And it was painful. And we could be in the same room and we just couldn't get back to where we were when I was 12 because that was gone. That had been violated. That had been damage had been done there. And it's almost like you've got your hand out and you're holding the person at some distance, and try as you will, you can't quite bring yourself to let that arm down. So Superman is not able to do that until he finds out the crap that Lex did, because she goes to Lex, and of course, him being Lex, that's going to turn out to be a bad idea. And in an ironic way, Lex actually does help him get home. Because it snaps him out of this malaise he's in.
Yes.
And now he just wants to wring Lex's neck. And Dan Jurgens stopped in because we were running behind schedule. And I've known Dan forever. And I just had a great time where Dan is just drawing Superman beating the hell out of Lex Luthor repeatedly. Yes. And it's gorgeous. It's like Death of Superman. It's Dan Jurgens and Brent Reading. What more can you want? But yeah, yep. It's just this is the story where you think you know where it's going. Yes, again. That's all I can tell you. And by the way, Carlo Pagulayan is the hero of this was his book. So Carlo, hats off, congratulations to Carlo. Unbelievably great work with him and Jason Patz and Jeremy, our colorist, Willie Schubert, our letterer. It's the whole team from Deathstroke. If you read our Deathstroke, if you liked our Deathstroke, this is the entire Deathstroke creative team moved on to Superman, and just everybody is just swinging for the fences on this book.
Totally agree, man. Snake wanted to know, do you have more different Superman ideas that you'd like to pursue, because he's loving this series?
Well, yes and no. Sure. It'd be great to do, I guess, more Superman. I feel like I'm kind of at a stage in my career where I'm crossing things off a bucket list, where I'm just going, sure. And I'm just grateful that 45 years later, thank you, that somebody finally let me write this character. I'm not a guy that people tend to hire for their top tier characters. I'm not exactly sure. It could be my sterling personality. But I think it has, something to do with the fact that there is an appetite for a certain type of approach and a certain type of writing, and I am frequently the square peg trying to get into that round hole. So a lot of that's kind of up to DC. I would ideally like the Brian Bendis deal, and I expressed this to DC, and I think they chuckled. They just laughed and laughed, But I said, I know I'll never get the Brian Bendis money, but I don't want to write another Superman story. I want to be the god of Superman. I want you to hand me the franchise and go away and just let me do something different and new with Superman, rather than what I feel. At times, I feel that we are spending too much time in nostalgia, and we're going, here's the good old days, and here's what Superman should be, or here's what Spider-Man should be, or whatever like that. And I think that we have that is attributing to the attrition in our fan base, because we have people who have been like myself, who have been reading comics their whole lives.
Yes.
And we're ready for something new. We're ready for the publishers to take a chance. And whether you liked what Brian did with Superman or you dislike what Brian did with Superman, at least he took his shot, right? He took his shot, and he went out there, and it was brave, and it's like it's like being a stand-up comedian or a good preacher. I've never been a comedian. I have been a preacher. I can't be a good preacher if I'm afraid. I have to go out there, stand before the people, and take my shot. And maybe I fall on my face, or maybe I actually do some good out there, but that's what I would want, hand me the keys and let me drive, or,
Yes.
I don't know, maybe we'll do another thing like this. I don't know. But I don't see them giving anybody, not just me, I don't see them giving anybody the Brian Bendis keys anymore. But if they did, I'd like to apply for that job.
No, I hear you, man. And I think you're right. And this is the eternal struggle of you want the familiar, but again, people like us, I'm 59, Priest. I've been reading DC, like you said, all my life as well, going back to the 70s. And I want more internal. I think there is so much more to the characters than the sameness that we get in the usual Superman stories. And and you're right. I think Bendis did take a moment to really get inside of Superman and all the other characters as well and really make them sing. I think King did the same thing in Batman and a lot of what he did in Batman. So, I mean, the opportunity.
And they ran him out of town for it,
Well, and you would hope that Black Label is a place where these kind of stories
could happen.
Is Lost considered a Black Label story?
No, but it wasn't until we were like on issue 5 that somebody said, "Why didn't we do this as Black Label?" And I don't know. I just work here. But back to what you were saying though, it's fun now to criticize the Marvel Universe films or the DC Extended Universe. Okay. And now that people are kind of like, it's become sort of this game now where we're all waiting with our knives out rather than looking for what's good in the Flash. We're, okay, I could get past some of the bad CGI and the baby in the oven wasn't like my favorite part.
Yeah, that was
that kind of thing.
Yeah,
but you can't argue that wasn't fun film. I can think of worse ways to spend 90 minutes, John.
I hear you, Priest. I got to be honest, and it's nothing against Ezra Miller, the person.
I thought he did a good job.
But I have to admit, the characterization of Barry Allen in the DCEU, I didn't feel like Ezra Miller was the right actor to play Barry Allen. And to have two versions of that Barry Allen made it a little less enjoyable for me. That said, I thought the Supergirl character was interesting.
Yep.
Keaton did a great job. Yep. It was it's like somebody just got an old
turned on a light, right? It just turned on a light. He shows up in that, and he puts and at first I really didn't know who he was when he shows up in the kitchen because I was like, oh crap, that's him, but and as far as Ezra goes, I guess what I did was at some point I surrendered to the idea that and this is back in Justice League.
Sure.
I surrendered to the idea that this is who Barry Allen is in this DC Extended Universe.
Yeah.
Because the Barry Allen, as I wrote him, as I remembered him, was obviously not that guy. So at some point I went, okay, this ain't my Barry Allen, but I will enjoy this performance for what it is. But the point I guess the point I was trying to make was lost somewhere ago because I'm old. But the point I was trying to make is that I've had good and bad experiences in terms of how these characters have been reinterpreted for film and streaming and so forth.
Sure.
Where I've discovered new things, where people new writers have come along with new interpretations and found new blood in Spider-Man. They found, like Spider-Man shows up. Like I've seen the Spider-Man films. I liked virtually all of it, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
Different iterations of Spider-Man. But when that character showed up in Civil War, I went, there you go. I went, sure. These guys, and I'm talking about the writing. The acting was great too, but I'm talking about the writing right now. These guys understand what this guy's about. It's like, what was the line in Airport where Spider-Man goes, oh, you have a metal arm? And that's so Spider-Man, right? And I went, or in any number of the earlier films right up through Endgame, where as a writer, as a guy who's been doing this for 40 years, I would sit there and go, wow, that's brilliant. I wish I had thought of that. And that's what I want to see, and that's what readers want to experience. We want that experience. I remember reading Frank Miller's Daredevil. Now, mind you, I used to work there. I knew Frank Miller, and became a fan of Frank Miller. I worked 2 doors over from Denny O'Neil. I saw Frank all the time, so he, and once he took over for McKinsey, he started writing Daredevil, I would go home with the Daredevil comic book, and I would read this thing, and I'd get to page 20 or 18 or whatever it was in those days.
Sure.
But you get to the last page and you put the comic down, you just go, holy crap, and you're kind of pissed because it's over. And you go and you're looking at the letters page and the ads. You're like, it's got to be more, right? There's more, And I went, and that's the experience that I think everybody who reads comics, who loves comics, wants to have. We want to fall in love with the characters. We want the work to be so good, the art, the writing, all of it to be so good that it's an immersive experience and it's an emotional experience. There was this scene where, the Warlocks, or not Morlocks with an M, the Morlocks had kidnapped Vanessa, Kingpin's wife,
Yes.
And you get toward the end of the story and Kingpin is alone in his office, and this wedding band comes flying in from off panel and bounces off his desk. And it's Vanessa's wedding band, and he picks it up, and you just see Kingpin, this giant asshole, excuse my language, but this guy, but you see him break just from holding this wedding band. And now he wants to know what's Daredevil's price. And the price is releasing the mayor or whatever the story was. Excuse me, Frank. Yeah. It's been a while since I read that. But I went, this mother effer, I'm reading this and going, you bastard, because you came through the door after me and you've been in the business 10 minutes and you're this good, and that's the experience that I had, that I want to have when I read comics. And when I move up to my computer, and I'm banging out my little hack work, my little nickel and dime pony show here. Win or lose, John, I am desperately trying to give you that moment where you go, holy crap, that bastard. That's what I want to have happen.
You got me hanging on issue 9 of Superman Lost. I don't know when 10 comes out, but and I suspect maybe there might be a delay.
Woo! 10 was wow almighty. I think 10 might have ended some marriages. It was really tough. There's just there are reasons that I won't go into because they're personal, but they're I wrote this a long time ago, so it's not my fault. Okay.
Okay.
There were lots of production issues. There was lots of issues and personal issues going on with Carlo, and it was just tough to get that book closed. It is at the printer. It should be out, I would imagine, in early January. I don't have a date,
no problem.
And I'm just hoping and praying that I didn't blow it, because this is a story that you go, how on earth are you going to land this plane? How are you going? We already know he got home. That's not the question. The question is, how do you put a satisfying button on this? How does Lois finally get her man back? Because she's tried everything there is to try. And then how do you do all that in 20 pages? And of course, I won't give up the cliffhanger, but the cliffhanger for 9 has to be one of the greatest cliffhangers.
Fantastic, Pete. Fantastic. And it really has me wondering.
By the way, that cliffhanger, that got the people at DC too, because all of a sudden my editor was under siege by the higher ups, on top of the higher ups going, what are you doing? You can't do that. What are you doing? And then, so we had to sort of give up how how issue 10, how the series resolves itself in order to calm them down. Before a minute, I was about to get everybody on my team fired. I mean, you gotta see the cliffhanger in issue 9 and just understand that nobody above my editor knew what we were really up to or what was going on. But all of a sudden there was okay, slam on the brakes, Priest has lost his mind. He can't do this. So there you go.
Hey, man, no, break some windows. I am for it. That's good. Well, honestly.
But I'm sorry. Let me just say one thing, John.
Sure.
But I promise you, I will not betray the reader's trust. I understand who the character is. I understand your investment with the character. So don't freak out. I will not, going back to Bendis for a minute, I'm not suggesting that Bendis broke trust with the readers, but I'm saying that he took his shot, he took his chances, and I think that kind of rubbed some readers the wrong way. So it's kind of like, yes, we want change, but we want you to respect the character. We want you to stay in your lane. How do I do something interesting and stay in my lane? So you'll have to tell me if we made it or not. We'll have to come back here after issue 10 comes out, and then you tell me stick the landing or not. That's all.
Oh, you can count on it. No, that's great. Well, and I remember I did a panel at Terrificon, the Connecticut show, with Denny O'Neil and Jim Starlin, and they were talking. And it's funny because DC has just re-released Death in the Family with the alternate scenes of Robin living or Jason living. And
really?
Oh yeah, it's
okay. I didn't know that.
It's coming out, but if it's not already out, I get advanced stuff. I'm on the press list, but both Starlin and Denny went into detail about killing Jason and how the higher ups are like, "What are you doing? You're killing Robin." And they're like, "No. It's not Robin. It's a Robin." And Dick Grayson's like, "No, right." Because again, they don't understand the stories and just the consequences that came of it. I mean, it cost Starlin his gig. I mean, luckily it worked out for him. He went back to Marvel and did all that great, Infinity.
I didn't know that. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, really?
And it's. I'm like, oh my God. I hope I'm not, opening.
Nobody likes Jason. Nobody likes Jason.
No,
everybody was voting 2 and 3 times. Kill.
I spent my 50 cents to kill Jason. Absolutely, 100%. But that's the thing. It's like, no, you need to provoke people. You need to, and that's what I was hoping for. And I think we get it in a lot of Black Label stories. I think what Tom King did with Adam Strange on that Black Label series was really radical. And that's great. And the same with Human Target. I thought that was a great series. And it's like, there's got to be room, and I'll put it in the simplest terms. There's got to be room for the Adam West Batman and the Frank Miller Batman. And they should be able to come out simultaneously without any waves of, well, wait a minute, this, I don't understand. First of all, us adult readers, we do understand. Keep it out of the hands of the kids. Let them read the Adam West Batman. Let them read the basics, and that's okay. But don't deny us older readers the opportunity to get inside these characters' heads and really explore. And I think that's what you did with Lost. Oops, your microphone's off, Priest. If you get
I was talking to Alexa.
Oh, I beg your pardon. All right.
I know I got the heat on and I'm starting to roast here, so I just told her to turn.
Okay, brother.
But with Tom, well, first of all, there's a lot of money tied up in these characters. So it's and now that Disney owns Marvel and who owns DC this week? It's Discovery Plus.
Exactly.
Okay.
Discovery, Warner. Yeah, Warner Brothers Discovery.
Warner Disco. So there's a lot of corporate interest, and now that they've actually made successful film franchises, now there are billions with a B, billions of dollars swirling around, Wonder Woman. So I want to see what Tom does with Wonder Woman, and what they will allow him to do within, because Tom and I, we're very different writers, but I think we both want to do that thing. We want to do, the familiar and yet explore. I would not like to see Tom or myself relegated to secondary characters or tertiary characters. I don't want to see us relegated to the Human Targets and the Adam Stranges of the universe. I think we really desperately need to see, that sort of energy on the front lines as much as possible. I have just nothing but admiration for Tom. And I think in fact in Superman there was lots of places where I was like cribbing from him. if not necessarily a specific bit of business from Tom, but where I was kind of emulating his style or thinking about how Tom would do something. And then just lots of places where I would just be stuck for an idea and I would just sit here and go, what would Mark Waid do? And then I'd know what to do. The spirit of Mark Waid, would enter the room, or I would just call Mark Waid, which always works too, that kind of thing. But these are amazing writers. I'm really excited to see what Jason Aaron is getting ready to do. Not only is he a terrific writer, he's a terrific person. I've met him a few times, and I'm just like, well, that's interesting. Jason Aaron on Superman, there's just, I do think, 85 years in, John, I think we've only just begun. There's still so much room to explore, because for most of that 85 years, we were doing this sort of Silver Age stuff where it was just plot device, and then we have, Beppo, the super monkey, who would come in with the gold kryptonite and boom, would solve the problem or whatever. So we weren't really doing character-driven Superman or character-driven Batman. So it's only within the last, 20 years, 30 years, whatever it's been, that we've been doing these kind of introspective deep dives. So there's still lots of room. And same thing with Vampirella, where for years they would just kind of work in the suit. No offense to other writers, to Steve Skates or other writers, Archie. These are brilliant writers. These are great guys, but they weren't doing what I'm doing. What I'm doing is giving her a pulse, and I'm going, what would this person actually be like? So if you like what Tom King does, I'm not doing what Tom King does specifically, but it's the same sort of idea where he is taking Christopher Chance or he's taking Adam Strange, and he's going, okay, stop the presses. What would these characters actually be like if they were breathing and walking around, and what would their conflicts be? What would their challenges be? And he's looking beyond the ray gun, and he's looking beyond, the gimmick of Mr. Miracle and so forth. All that's in there. But what the fun part about the series is actually getting inside the characters' heads and roaming around in there. And there's nobody better at it than Tom.
You're selling yourself short, Chris, because I think you're doing it. I think Brian does it as well. The better writers. The problem was for decades, the company didn't realize, both companies, that, Stan would be, college kids love the Hulk. And it's like, yes, they did, but like all of a sudden it sunk in that, wait, adults like this stuff too, and we want something grittier, and with, again, we still love the characters, but like you said, we want the internal stuff, and it took a long time for the companies to recognize that. It took Miller doing Dark Knight, and it took Moore and Gibbons doing Watchmen, and the various tentpole comics that really made a difference. And it's, I really think you're right. I think it's only been in the last few years where it's like, all right, we've got this adult audience, let's cater to them. And I think they're trying, but like you said, there's still the corporate masters that still see it as, we got to sell birthday cakes. We got to, licensing.
And then some of that is out of DC's hands or out of Marvel's hands.
100%.
Where they go, we would like to do this. And there's been times when I've had stuff approved at that level, at the publisher level, at the Jim Lee level, and then had somebody in corporate. There's one project that I won't mention because, I might be doing it over at Skybound.
Hey, great.
But there was a project that was approved at DC, was championed by 3 different group editors, not just editors, but the supervisors. 3 different group editors, and Marie Javins loved it as well. And it was all thumbs up, and then somebody from corporate said, no, we're not going to do it because of this or that consideration that was outside of the merits of the idea itself, but it had to do with marketing and other things that were going on that I won't get into. So every now and then somebody in a suit, and see, for years, Paul Levitz kept us away from that.
Yes.
Because Jeanette, God bless Jeanette Kahn for years, Jeanette Kahn was the person who would go into the Whirling Knives, and she would deal with the suits. She would deal with Hollywood. She would deal with Burbank. She would deal with these people, and Paul would be running the store here in New York, there in New York. And, and now, with those people no longer being our firewall between us and the corporate thing, we actually have them, they read all the scripts. They read everything now. And then they go, oh gosh, you can't give Spider-Man a dog. We don't approve that.
Wolverine can't smoke cigars anymore, which I get, but it's so small, and it's like, all right, I mean, us old timers are like, I get it, but really?
I understand the point. Yes, we want to be good role models for kids. Kids really aren't reading this, and then. I just had this discussion today with Dynamite where we were trying to decide how many butts can we show in an issue of Vampirella. 1 butt, 2 butt, 3 butts. How many butts? Let's get a butt count of, so the Warren, when Jim Warren was publishing Vampirella,
yes,
the rule was no genitalia, no nipples. Okay, so
makes sense.
You get like a side of a breast occasionally. Yep. And every now and then you see maybe part of a tushy or something like that. But it was basically whatever would pass muster on broadcast TV today, whatever could be on NYPD Blue, for example.
I'm totally.
They had the rules on NYPD Blue of how many butts and how much side of a breast could you see. So I was negotiating that with them because Ergun turned this page in, this beautiful page. And I think I wrote in the story that it's early in the morning and Vampirella's out on this balcony, and I said she's wearing a robe, but I maybe it lost somewhere in translation. She wasn't wearing a robe, so there became this whole conversation about it, but some of this stuff, is ends up in the purview of the overlords, whose concerns. Rightly so. They're very concerned about this franchise. Oh no, what I said today was kids don't read Vampirella, and they don't read Vampirella for 2 reasons. One, retailers tend to segregate Vampirella because Vampirella, has a culture around it of being basically an adult comic. It is 100%. Not, but it is not. It's a fun comic book. It's got a little titillation to it, but it's not anything like Jim Warren was. It's not that anymore. It's really and then we did year one, where for half of Vampirella year one, she's a kid. She's a kid who's sneaking a cow onto a subway. Okay. And I'm going, why are you hiding that behind the counter? Ooh, we have to hide this behind the counter. It's a child sneaking a cow on the subway, let it live, but it's she's got the character has a stigma about it, and the argument I made for the butt count was, our audience is, we are playing to an audience of adults. By and large, children don't read comics anymore. That's our fault collectively, the collective our fault, because we allowed Dick Grayson to grow up, which I thought was a terrible idea. Because that was fan service. Archie Andrews never grew up. Betty never grew up.
Right.
Richie Rich is still a kid. Right. Casper, Friendly Ghost, still a dead baby. And I thought that once Disney with Mickey Mouse and Minnie and Goofy, they recycle their audience every 4 to 8 years, and they bring in a new crop of kids and introduce them to these characters and to this idea and to this universe. And DC was good at that for decades. They were good at that.
100%.
And bringing in the new audience and bringing in a new audience, and then you would sort of graduate from DC to Marvel, frankly. And right. DC was doing. Was the best at being DC, and I can't explain that. Just the Kurt Swan, Murphy Anderson, the Irv Novick Flash, this classic stuff. They were the very best at doing that. and then Marvel was its own identity and its own place, and it all was this sort of Stan Lee worldview, a very hopeful worldview, but a very different place from Marvel. So you kind of went from DC to Marvel, and there was plenty of room for everybody, and we were all selling 2 million comics, a month, and per issue. Now, mind you, the Mafia was putting like a third of that into a paper shredder, but that's a different conversation. Okay, it was just that kind of idea. God, I was going someplace with this, and now I'm spacing out where I was going with it.
I'm assuming comics for kids. And now,
right. There you go. Yeah. So I said, look, no kids aren't reading Vampirella because we left kids alone a long time ago, which was a big mistake, because now we are singing to an increasingly shrinking choir. We are playing to the this choir that's getting smaller every year. But I assure you, no children will be harmed by the butts in Vampirella, and more to the fact, kids these days they have actual porn. They have access.
Yes, they do.
They have porn that you and I could only dream of when we were 12.
100%. No, we had Sears catalogs with women in underwear. That was our porn.
This is what I'm talking about. Well, see, I was more purient than that. I would go, with my friends down to the newsstand, and one of them would distract the guy at the counter, and I'd get a copy of like Playboy or something,
sure,
and stick it up my pants leg or something, wrap it around my calf, and walk out the store with it. I mean, it was like all I could do to be like, like under the covers in my room with a flashlight, looking at like, this issue of like, Playboy, where like, back in those days, you didn't see that. They didn't reveal that much. Playboy was really tame. It didn't really show you that much, But nowadays, I'm scared to death. These poor kids. It's like, I've got a very close friend who as a granddaughter, and the granddaughter has a cell phone. I said, well, did you put parental controls? Did you turn the parental controls on the cell phone? I mean, it's an iPhone. Apple has great parental controls. You should turn those on. And she just kind of rolls her eyes like she does every time I advise. If I told her the sky was blue, she would find a way to, blow that off. The sky's not blue. But I'm just terrified because she's an impressionable preteen and giving an impressionable preteen a cell phone that you are not monitoring through parental controls is like handing her a loaded gun, because now 100%. She's wandering around the internet where, everywhere you go, there's porn. Everywhere you go, there's weirdos, pretending to be little kids. Meet me after school, that kind of stuff. You're just asking for it, So my argument with Dynamite was like, kids today have real porn. They're really not going to be freaked out by seeing, Vampirella's butt on this page here. But let's get like let's settle on some sort of formula, 1.5 butts per issue or whatever, and move on. So that was our discussion, today.
It's amazing, Priest. I swear. I do feel for you guys. It always comes down to writing, Priest, and that's the thing. Whether it's television, film, or comics or novels, it's got to be in the writing, and that's where
they remember the artwork, just like they remember the Robert Downey performance. But if somebody hadn't written that performance in Endgame, if somebody hadn't written that snap, you see what I mean? If those two guys who are brilliant writers, whose names are escaping me right now because I'm trying to remember them, and I met them and they were so kind to me, and now I'm being a jerk because I can't remember the guys who wrote Endgame, but those two guys who wrote Endgame, just brilliant writers. If they hadn't come up with that, there'd be nothing for Downey to play.
Right. 100%, man.
And as much as I love Alex Ross, as much as I love, for that matter, my guy Carlo, and your favorite artist here, write in JR, your famous artist here, the exception to the rule are writer artist guys like Miller, who can dazzle us in both ways, and who could just take our breath away in how they express themselves.
Mike says, is it Marcus and McFeely that wrote Endgame?
Yes, I think so. Yes, that sounds right to me. Yes.
I mean, I know the Russos directed it, but yeah.
Yeah. And
Cool.
I was on the set of not Endgame. What's the one before that?
Infinity War.
Yeah, I was on the set of Infinity War, and these guys came over, and they were very gracious, very kind to me. And I had spoken to them by email before. And hey, Mark Ruffalo pushed past me to get to the craft services table.
Sure.
If you're ever invited to a movie set, by the way, let me tell you something. The food is outrageous. They spoiled it. I don't know how they don't all just get like big and fat like me, but they had great food there. Being on a movie set is the most exciting 15 minutes of your life, followed by 6 hours of sheer boredom.
I'm with you. I've been, yes.
Because I'm sitting there and I'm watching Ruffalo and Scarlett Johansson do this scene, and they're in the Quinjet, and they built this doggone Quinjet. The Quinjet is on the stage. It's this huge Quinjet suspended from the ceiling. I'm like, oh, and it's great when you get there and you watch them do the scene. You go, wow, that was awesome, and then they do it again. You go, wow, that was even better. And then they do it again. Wow, that was really great. And then you're sitting there for an hour while they're adjusting the lights, because now they're moving for this other shot. Okay, so like an hour later, now they're going to start all over again, and they start doing this, and it's the same like 3 minutes of 3 pages of script or whatever it is, and they're doing it over and over and over, and then they stop, and now it's another hour. No, they stop and they break for lunch. And then they come back, and then there's another hour of them adjusting the lights, and they do, and now they're doing the close-up of Scarlett, right? And now, and another hour, and now they're doing the close-up, the reverse of Ruffalo, and I'm going, Jesus, let me out of here. We were doing, they were doing like a walk-in talk with Chadwick Boseman, and this was on location here, on location in Atlanta. And so I was on the set for that, and I got to meet Mr. Boseman, which was just great. And he's a comic book fan. He knew who I was, and that was incredibly flattering that he would come over and he just ran over and gave me this big bear hug. And I thought I was being thrown out. That's what I thought was happening. So why is this man charging at me? Yeah, So they're doing this walk-in talk down this hill, and it had rained the night before. It was freezing in the morning, mud up to my knees, ruining my shoes. My shoes were just toast, and it was just, and then every time they walked down the hill, they were walking down the hill, and I think somebody was asking Shala for his help, and they're walking down the hill, and they pass these guys that are tending sheep, and at the bottom of the hill, that's where the Winter Soldier comes out of this hut, So they did this thing, and every time they walked down the hill, one of the sheep would take a dump. And Anthony Russo or the other Russo, one of the Russo guys would go cut and expletive, because we got to trudge back up the hill, and we got stuff to do. We're tired, and they trudge, they reset, they start again, and they walk down the hill, they walk and talk down the hill. The sheep takes another sheep, oh crap, back up the hill again, that kind of thing. So at some point I turned to Chadwick and go, Mr. Boseman, it was just an honor meeting you, and I'm so thrilled to be here. But you know what? I have to leave. I just can't. It's cold and I want to go home, and I really had a new appreciation for what actors do, because yes, they make a lot of money, John. But believe me, those people, those men and women, those people, they arrive on the set very early. They spend hours getting all this stuff glued to their face, and then they're on their feet for 18, 20 hours, going up and down and up and down and up and saying the same thing over and over and over and over. I really had an appreciation for just how hard these people work. They honest to gosh, they really do work very hard on these things. It takes a long time. Yeah.
Yeah, that's incredible. But Boseman was aware that, you did so much for Panther and everything. And he knew who you were. That's so great, man. Oh, that's wonderful. And I'm sure, God, like the rest of us, I mean, and even more so for him. I mean, like, right, you provided the Bible for him for what he was doing.
Well, yes and no, because his Panther is like the prince who becomes king. My Panther had been around for a long time. So my Panther was much more like Christian Bale's Batman. He was more taciturn. He spoke less. He was more mysterious. And my Panther book was about all these people trying to second guess, what is Panther about to do next? So it would, if they had done a strict interpretation of my character rather than a blended model of Ta-Nehisi's character and McGregor's character and so forth.
Okay.
If they had done a strict interpretation of my character, it would have been a whole different. It would have been much more like The Batman, that film. It would have been much closer to that, which I really loved. By the way, I some people love it or hate it, but I've watched that movie about 20 times. I'm just studying. I'm just in awe. That's cool. Of this craft that went into that. And Panther would have been much more like that, where he just would have been this kind of borderline psycho, and it would have been sort of the late Matthew Perry as Ross, because when I was writing Ross, I was thinking he looked like Michael J. Fox, but I was writing Matthew Perry's character from Friends.
Interesting. Yeah.
So I kept hearing Matthew Perry's voice every time I was writing Ross.
Yeah.
So, imagine this very serious, very stoic, king, monarch, but his story is being told, by Chandler from Friends.
That's hilarious.
So that mix was kind of how, the Marvel Knights, Black Panther, that was sort of the foundation for that. So what they did wisely with the film was they centered it. They made it more family friendly. And my guy had been king for at least like 13 to 15 years by the time my story began. So he was kind of hardened, and he was like, and nobody could fool him, and he couldn't be taken by surprise. No one could surprise him, and that takes a lot of choices away from an actor and a writer like Chadwick and like Robert Joe Cole, who's the co-writer along with the director on Black Panther. So they're telling the story of the prince who becomes king, and he's still young and still capable of being taken by surprise. And like my guy would have seen Killmonger coming a long time before this guy saw him.
I get it now. Yeah, I'm with you.
That kind of thing. So, and I thought it was the right choice, because what that film did was it discovered a audience that Marvel never knew they had. Grandmothers went to see Black Panther. People who would never have thought to set foot in a Marvel film, who could give a damn about Thor or whoever. They put butts in seats that had never been in those seats for those types of films before. And they found this enormous audience. So the film did really well, not only with the traditional Marvel audience, who by word of mouth, I think some of them sampled it, and then word of mouth brought in more, because Black Panther was not really the most popular character. And why should we go see Black Panther? Now, mind you, we all said the same thing about Iron Man. A lot of people didn't know who Iron Man was, until the first film came out. So there was some of that sales resistance. But the groundswell of goodwill, particularly from communities of color and from people who were not necessarily superhero fans, it really ignited something. And I talked to the executive producer, this guy Nate Moore, and we had several conversations because I consulted on the movie, and we had several conversations about it. And I said, well, Nate, just don't blow it, because, in the Black community, everybody's watching you on this one. If this comes out and it's a farce or a spoof like the Green Hornet movie, they're going to hand you your hat. You're going to get eaten alive. And he just laughed and he said, he's not worried. It's going to be fine. And I went to the premiere along with Ta-Nehisi and Don McGregor and lots of other people who worked on the Black Panther comics. And for me, it was like a religious experience. I was weeping. That first vision of Wakanda, where they do the flyover of the huts, and then the illusion fades and you see Wakanda as what it really is, the gleaming city and all that other stuff. It was, and he had the perfect the perfect music. Ryan Coogler, the director, he had the perfect music that went with it, and that whole moment where I felt like, myself along with millions of other people of color, where we felt like we had finally arrived. It was finally us up there on that screen, being represented on that screen in a legitimate way, in a way that was knowledgeable of our culture, appreciative of our culture. And it wasn't just tokenism. It wasn't just, okay, some afterthought, but it was true representation. So, I take whatever small credit that is due me in the film there, but there's a whole lot of Brian Stelfreeze up there that Brian, the artist for Ta-Nehisi, doesn't get credit for.
I love Brian.
Ta-Nehisi reimagined the Dora Milaje as these female warriors. When I was writing the Dora Milaje, I created the Dora Milaje, but I created them as a religious order. They were nuns. They were, yes, they could fight, but they weren't. I didn't see them as an army. This was Ta-Nehisi's innovation, and then there was innovations that were done by Reginald Hudlin and by other people that had contributed to that. So it was an amalgam of these visions, and very smartly done. And it's tragic that we lost Chadwick, because there was so many other places to go with that character and with that cast.
And with that idea, Priest, I'm so glad you brought that up, because I always go back to, is it possible that maybe they should have, and maybe they still in a future way will cast someone else as T'Challa? Because I agree with you. The tragedy of so much more story to be had with Chadwick's T'Challa that we didn't get. You tell me. I mean, really, I'm the knucklehead white guy asking the question, but
No. I would imagine, if I put on my studio hat, I would imagine that at some point they may do a Panther reboot. They may just reboot it altogether, because that they did that with Spider-Man a bunch of times, and they've done it with the Hulk a couple of times.
Yeah.
I think if they proceed with this cast, it would be a bad move to put somebody else in Shala's costume, unless you fed the heart-shaped herb to Michael B. Jordan, which I assumed they were going to do.
Yeah.
But the problem with that is, I don't know. I didn't read Mr. Jordan's contract. I don't know him. I did not read his contract, but I'm assuming they did not sign him to a multi-picture deal, which was like a huge mistake, because they probably could have. They probably could have signed him to a multi-picture deal then, because now he's way too huge, and this is the problem with the Marvel Cinematic Universe as a whole, is that they created all these stars, and the way it works is, with each successive film, the star gets a pay bump or whatever the story is, and then based on the popularity or whatever. So it is now astronomically expensive to hire Robert Downey, or to hire these other people, and locking Jordan into a multi-picture deal, it will eat up a great deal of the film's budget just to hire Jordan. But that's the logical story-driven thing, because I actually wrote a story arc where Killmonger wins the battle with T'Challa and becomes Black Panther, and he's kind of lousy at it. They kind of alluded to it in the film, but mine was much longer, and my Killmonger was a much bigger asshole than Jordan. It's a Don McGregor character, and I read Don's stuff, and I just kind of extrapolated from what Don did. Sure. I just went like, this guy, But what they did in the film, which was so brilliant, was yes, he was the heavy, the Jordan character, the Killmonger character, but he was a guy who had a point.
Yes.
He had a good argument, and that's all he needed to redeem that character, to make that character work and move him to the center. If they had bothered to sign him to a multi-picture deal so that the studio had the option to bring him back at thus and such a price for two or three films, and lock that price in when you could afford the guy. Now, Mr. Creed, I don't know. I don't know. But then again, this is not my. I don't work in that line.
No, I hear you.
That would be the story-driven way to continue with this cast. Otherwise, you recast everybody and reboot the thing. And I don't know. Marvel is my impression is that Marvel Films is watching the DC extended universe implode, and they're taking notes and they're going, God, let's not let that happen to us. And so we're rough sledding through the Jonathan Majors, and we're rough sledding through, some of the shows that worked or didn't work, and now we're at this place where it's like, as I said, like an hour ago, whatever it was, that it's now become de rigueur or it's become fun to just badmouth every superhero movie that comes out. And and we all have our knives out to just badmouth everything. So I think Marvel Films is probably more reluctant to just clean sweep and reboot their universe, because they see what's happening over at DC and the challenges that the DC guys have, because they've got to get that whole DC franchise back up on its feet, and put it out there in front of an audience that is waiting to just beat up on it, because it's fun to beat up on DC these days. So I don't see them, rebooting Panther. I don't know what they're going to do, but it'll be interesting to find out.
Priest, my God, it's I see, especially East Coast time, it's close to midnight. I don't want to keep you awake if I'm.
I'm good, but okay? I'm a blabbermouth, but it's up to you. You be the timekeeper.
No, Priest, seriously, they came to watch you talk, and everything you're saying is amazing and interesting, and I love where the conversation has gone. So please do not feel like I've spoken too much. No, this has been terrific. We can always reconvene for the end of Superman Lost and come back. But I'm curious about reactions too, because my God, it was like, how do I end this story? I'm really sweating it. I'm really sweating reader reaction to number 2. I'm kind of relieved that's a little late, because now I get through the Christmas holiday without people telling me what an idiot I am. He sucks. Christopher Reeve's bastard. No,
I'm sorry. It's not this. It's this now. It's the thumbs.
That's right.
We hate him.
Well,
I'm not on social media for a reason. I think generationally, at some point I just decided I'm going to sit this out, whatever this is with the thumbs, and I can't. And I used to have a website. I had 2 websites. I had the comic book website, which is ChristopherPriest.com. And then I had my ministry website, which is called PraiseNet, one word, .org. And I think both of them would get me, canceled, because anytime you express an opinion, people are just ready to burn your house down now. And free speech, whatever it is just, so under siege. So I think most of what I wrote on the PraiseNet is so old now, where I'm like complaining about George W. Bush. I think I'm safe complaining about George W. Bush, but I tend to not mouth off online anymore, because I like my job and I don't want people to come and burn my house down. It's silly. You should be able to not like Donald Duck or whatever, and me not hate you. I don't hate you because you don't like the Ezra Miller's Flash.
I hear you.
I don't hate you, John. I don't hate you.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Priest. Absolutely. Will we get new announcements for other? Like you said, you might be Skybound or something, perhaps. If
the Skybound thing is really up in the air. I can tell you that we are having conversations. There's some things I would like to do. The trick is to find a publisher that's a right fit, a publisher who basically thinks they could sell the thing that you would like to do. So there's that. There's at least 4 projects at DC. There's a big project at Marvel that I'm not allowed to talk about because, my God, it's taking forever. But I assume in 24 you will see a fairly noise-making project at Marvel that will finally see the light of day. That I've been working on literally for 5 years. So there's that. There's the entropy thing that's being held hostage. There is my humanoid series. It's called Babylon. My humanoid series, which is again taking forever to get done, but every page is just absolutely gorgeous. And hopefully it's funny, it's poignant. Hopefully it's the kind of thing that'll remind you of Quantum and Woody. When they're ready to talk about it, I'll be glad to come back and kind of pimp that up. And of course the vampires. Of course, a bunch of stuff for a bunch of vampires for Dynamite. And then Dynamite has announced this Sterling North project that we're doing with Don Lee. That is just getting underway. I don't know. There's a bunch of stuff.
Cool. Well, that's great. Stuff.
Yeah.
No, Priest. That's great to hear. And truly, like I said, I love where the conversation went. I'm sorry for people in the chat because they had, like I said, some greatest hits questions and stuff.
Oh, I'm really sorry about that. Oh, wow.
No, Priest. It's cool. Again, I really love hearing about your on set experiences and really your thoughts on what's going on in comics. I mean, that's always part of the discussion here at Word Balloon is, because there's that segment of creators that are like, well, why can't we get little kids to read what we read? And it's like, that's so much to impart on a kid. Let them read Wimpy Kid. Let them read Renee Telgemeier. Let them read Dogman and all these kids' comics that they're loving. Let them have their thing. Yeah. And if they graduate to our thing, great. If they don't, that's okay too. But, there's room for it all. And so I love what you're saying, man, truly. And even people in the chat are saying right now, I was glued to every word that you guys were saying. So that's great, man. Truly.
If you want, you could send me a transcript of whatever the questions were, and I'll be happy to answer them by email or whatever. And you could either post that or we could come back and answer those. I don't have my glasses on. I didn't see them. I'm really sorry.
Not at all. No. Don't sweat it. And really, everyone is assuring you that no, it's been a really interesting discussion. And please, let's try for maybe February or whatever when Superman Lost comes out. Absolutely. I've got your contact info, and we'll do it again, man. That'll truly, be great. Man, this a wonderful pre-holiday conversation to tide us over this holiday weekend, Priest. I can't thank you enough. Really, I love where this has gone, and man, I'm looking forward to the next conversation. So thanks for tolerating my nonsense while you're here, man.
Well, I really appreciate you having me. I'm glad we got to do it before the holiday because next week I think everybody should just, everybody should shut down and shut up. Next week, let's just have peace on earth, goodwill toward men. Really stop fussing and fighting. With the Trump and not Trump and and all this other stuff. It's like, shut up. Everybody next week, everybody shut up. And let's just do the tree thing and the family thing. And at least for a week or so, let's all just get along. Can we do that? There you go. I would love to do that.
Heed the words of Christopher Priest.
Yes, please.
Thanks a lot for the conversation tonight, man. I really appreciate it. Everybody, thanks for watching. Thank you for listening. Have a great holiday weekend. And we will be back next week, but we won't be angry. I promise you. So we'll have happy talk. But thanks a lot for watching, everybody.